People think betrayal always happens loudly. They imagine screaming matches, slammed doors, stolen passwords, drained bank accounts. What happened to me was quieter than that. My own parents sat across from a vineyard owner, smiled politely, handed over forged paperwork with my name signed at the bottom, and tried to transfer $80,000 that didn't belong to them. I was 32 years old when I found out my family had stolen my wedding venue. Not borrowed it, not misunderstood some arrangement, stolen it. And the craziest part was that my mother honestly believed I'd eventually accept it. "You're not even married yet," she later told me, like that explained everything. "Your sister's birthday is happening now." But the venue had already been booked under my name for 7 months. Every contract was finalized. Every payment had cleared. The reservation belonged to me legally, financially, and personally. What none of my parents knew was that the woman who owned the vineyard happened to recognize my name the second they walked into her office. 2 hours after they left, my phone rang. That single phone call destroyed the version of my family I'd spent my entire life defending. My name is Savannah Pierce. I grew up outside Asheville, North Carolina, in a quiet neighborhood full of oversized lawns, matching mailboxes, and families obsessed with appearances. From the outside, we looked perfect. My father, Daniel Pierce, was a respected commercial property attorney. My mother, Elaine Pierce, volunteered at charity events and hosted wine nights for women who talked about kindness while judging everyone they knew. Then there was my younger sister, Chloe. Chloe was the center of every room she entered, not because she earned it, because my parents built the room around her. If Chloe got stressed, dinner plans changed. If Chloe cried, vacations were canceled. If Chloe made a mistake, somebody else cleaned it up. My role in the family was different. I was dependable, the calm one, the successful one, the daughter who supposedly didn't need much. That phrase followed me through my entire life. Savannah's independent. Savannah's mature. Savannah can handle herself. At first, those words sounded like compliments. Later, I realized they were excuses. Every time my parents said I was strong, what they really meant was that they planned to give their energy, money, and sympathy to someone else. When Chloe failed chemistry in high school, my parents hired a private tutor that cost more than my first used car. When I graduated near the top of my class, my mother hugged me with one arm while answering a phone call from Chloe about concert tickets. When Chloe wanted a Jeep for her 18th birthday, a Jeep appeared in the driveway with a giant red bow on it. When I needed textbooks during my sophomore year of college, my father suggested I learn financial discipline. I worked 2 jobs while studying software engineering full-time. Chloe's tuition was paid entirely by my parents. Mine wasn't. By the time I graduated, I had nearly $45,000 in student debt and a degree nobody in my family bothered celebrating properly. I still remember the day I landed my first real tech job. I drove nearly 4 hours home because I wanted to tell my parents face to face. I was 24 years old, exhausted, hopeful, and still stupid enough to think they'd finally be proud of me. I walked into the kitchen holding a bottle of wine and my offer letter. Mom barely looked up. "That's wonderful, honey," she said while scrolling through something on her iPad. "Can you set the table before Chloe gets here?" That was it. Years of work reduced to one distracted sentence. I should have stopped trying after that, but people like me don't stop easily. We keep carrying things because we think eventually somebody will notice how heavy they are. That was always my flaw. Not weakness, not innocence, responsibility. I kept believing that if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, sacrificed enough, eventually my family would love me the same way they loved Chloe naturally. Instead, they treated me like infrastructure, useful, reliable, invisible. By the time I turned 30, I was making good money as a senior developer in Charlotte. I bought my own condo, paid off most of my student loans, built a stable life from scratch without help from anyone. That's when I met Ethan Cole. He was charming in the easy kind of way, confident without seeming arrogant. He worked in medical sales, dressed well, laughed at the right moments, and never argued about anything serious. At the time, that felt peaceful. Now I know it was avoidance. We got engaged after 2 years together, and I started saving for the wedding almost immediately. Not because I cared about showing off, because I wanted one thing in my life that felt fully mine. Every bonus check went into a separate account. Every freelance coding project I took during weekends added more to it. I skipped vacations, kept driving the same aging SUV, cooked at home instead of eating out. For 6 straight years, I built that wedding fund dollar by dollar until it reached 80,000. I tracked everything in a spreadsheet every Sunday morning while drinking coffee at my kitchen counter. The venue mattered most to me. It was called Silver Ridge Estate, a private vineyard tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains about an hour outside Asheville. Stone walkways, massive oak trees, a terrace overlooking rolling hills, and rows of vines that turned gold at sunset. They only hosted a handful of events every year. Getting a reservation there took planning, money, and luck. I visited the property 3 separate times before booking it. The first time, I walked the grounds alone. The second time, I tasted wine with the event coordinator while imagining my future. The third time, I sat on the terrace during sunset and pictured myself walking toward a life I had built with my own hands. That was the moment I decided. I wired the full $80,000 deposit directly to the venue. The reservation covered the entire weekend, catering coordination, wine service, staff, everything. 2 weeks later, the confirmation package arrived. Heavy ivory cardstock with embossed copper lettering. I framed it and placed it on my desk at home. Some people keep awards on display. I kept proof that discipline eventually becomes something real. I told my parents the venue was booked. I didn't tell them the price. I didn't tell them the details. That was my mistake. Because eventually, my mother started asking strange questions. How large is the property? Does it have outdoor seating? Is parking difficult there? At the time, I thought she was just making conversation. Then Chloe's birthday invitation arrived in the mail. Black envelope, gold lettering, expensive cardstock. Inside was an invitation for Chloe Pierce's 30th birthday celebration. Formal attire required, live orchestra, private wine service, and at the bottom of the card was the venue name, Silver Ridge Estate. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I read them again, and again. Nobody had mentioned booking my wedding venue for Chloe's birthday. Not my mother, not my father, not Chloe, not even Ethan. Silver Ridge only hosted limited events every year. Every reservation slot had been filled months in advance, except mine. I stood in my kitchen holding that invitation while something cold slowly spread through my chest. At first, I thought maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe another section of the property had been booked. Maybe there was some overlap. Maybe. Then my phone rang. Unknown mountain area code. I answered anyway. Savannah? A woman asked. Yes? A pause. This is Camille Bennett. We went to college together. The name hit me instantly. Camille Bennett. We'd spent 2 years together in engineering labs at UNC Charlotte. She was the girl who always carried extra coffee to 8 a.m. classes and somehow remembered everyone's birthday. I sat down slowly at my kitchen counter. Camille? She laughed softly. Yeah, apparently you booked your wedding at my vineyard. That was the moment I learned Camille had inherited Silver Ridge Estate from her grandfather 2 years earlier. She'd left a software job in Seattle, moved back home, and turned the property into a luxury event venue. Then her tone changed. Listen, she said carefully, your parents came into my office today. My stomach tightened. They brought paperwork authorizing the transfer of your reservation to another event. A birthday party for someone named Chloe Pierce. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Camille continued carefully. The signature looked close enough at first glance, but then I noticed something. What? We signed too many group projects together for me not to recognize your handwriting. I closed my eyes. The capital P in your last name loops upward on the form, she said quietly. Your real signature never does that. I don't remember sitting down on the kitchen floor, but suddenly I was there, one hand still gripping my phone, the birthday invitation lying beside me. The room felt strangely silent, like the world had stepped backward while my brain struggled to catch up. I never signed anything, I finally said. I know, Camille replied immediately. That's why I called you before processing the transfer. I stared at the microwave clock across the kitchen. 7:18 p.m. For some reason, I remember that exact time clearly. Maybe because that was the moment my entire family stopped feeling safe to me. After the call ended, I stayed on the floor for nearly 15 minutes without moving. Then I stood up, walked to my office, opened my laptop, and started going through years of old messages from my mother, not reading them emotionally, reading them like evidence. Patterns appear differently when your heart finally steps aside. Every conversation sounded familiar once I noticed it. Chloe really needs help right now. Your sister is struggling. Can you spot us temporarily? Temporary never meant temporary. $3,000 for Chloe's car down payment when I was 23, $2,000 for her apartment deposit after she quit another job, money for dental bills, parking tickets, therapy retreats, weekend trips she desperately needed. Individually, each request had sounded reasonable. Together, they looked like a long-running withdrawal system disguised as family support. And I had funded it for years because saying no made me feel guilty. The vineyard deposit was simply the biggest thing they had ever taken, not the first. I leaned back in my chair and called Ethan. He answered on the second ring. Hey, babe. His voice sounded normal. Too normal. Did you know about the venue? I asked. Silence. Not confusion, not surprise. Silence. 4 seconds exactly. Then he exhaled softly. Your mom mentioned something. The room went cold. What exactly did she mention? She said you worked everything out. Worked everything out. Interesting phrase. He didn't ask what I meant. Didn't sound shocked. Didn't say, what are you talking about? He skipped directly to defense, which meant he already knew there was something to defend. She told you I agreed to give my $80,000 wedding venue to Chloe for a birthday party? I didn't know all the details, he said carefully. Carefully, like someone stepping across thin ice. I stared at the framed booking confirmation sitting on my desk. So you never thought to ask me? Another pause. She made it sound temporary. Temporary. That word again. I ended the call without yelling, without crying, without even raising my voice. That scared me more than anger would have, because anger still leaves room for emotion. Calm means something inside you has already started shutting down. The next morning, I found the email. Ethan and I shared a laptop for household stuff. Bills, spreadsheets, vacation planning, grocery lists. His email account was still logged in. I wasn't snooping for one specific thing anymore. At that point, I was searching for the full shape of the lie. 3 pages deep into his inbox, I found a PDF attachment, dated 8 months earlier. Subject line, private loan agreement. My chest tightened before I even opened it. $45,000, loaned from my father, Daniel Pierce, directly to Ethan Cole. No bank, no financial institution. Just my father's legal templates, his signature, and Ethan's name on the borrower line. Purpose listed, business investment. Ethan didn't own a business, didn't have investments. What he had was debt, and debt creates obedience. I sat there staring at the screen while everything rearranged itself in my mind. My parents hadn't just manipulated me, they had bought influence over my fiancé. That loan explained everything. Why Ethan never questioned the venue transfer, why he avoided details, why he kept telling me to keep the peace anytime conflict came up with my family. Quiet was cheaper than repayment. I saved the PDF into an encrypted folder on my desktop. Then I texted Camille. Don't transfer anything officially yet. Please give me time. Her reply came less than a minute later. Take all the time you need. 3 weeks. That's how long remained before Chloe's birthday party. 3 weeks until my family publicly celebrated themselves using something they had stolen from me. 3 weeks was enough. Camille connected me with an attorney named Victoria Hale. Civil litigation, fraud, financial abuse cases. Victoria's office sat inside a narrow brick building downtown near Asheville's legal district. No fancy decorations, no dramatic artwork, just clean shelves, organized files, and someone who looked permanently unimpressed by human stupidity. I brought everything: the booking confirmation, screenshots of texts, the forged authorization copy Camille had scanned, the loan agreement from Ethan's email, years of financial transfers to Chloe. Victoria reviewed every document quietly. No interruptions, no emotional reactions, just steady attention. When she finally removed her glasses, she looked directly at me. Your father wrote this authorization letter himself. How can you tell? The wording. She tapped the page. Normal people don't write like this. Real estate attorneys do. She read aloud. Authorized to act on behalf of the undersigned party for reservation reassignment purposes. Then she looked up again. He used his own legal language patterns, probably didn't even realize it. That somehow made it worse. Not a desperate forgery, a comfortable one, the kind done by somebody who believed they would never face consequences. Victoria stacked the papers neatly. You have several options, she said. I nodded silently. Civil fraud claims, forgery allegations, financial exploitation, potential criminal referral depending on what the district attorney wants to pursue. I swallowed hard. And Ethan? If we prove he knowingly concealed the fraud while benefiting from financial leverage created by your parents, he becomes part of the case. The room felt very small suddenly. Victoria leaned back slightly. When is the party? 3 weeks? Something shifted in her expression then, not sympathy, strategy. If we file now and serve them publicly during the event, she said calmly, every reaction becomes documented in front of witnesses. I stared at her. She continued, people reveal who they really are when consequences arrive unexpectedly. I thought about my mother smiling through lies. My father forging signatures like paperwork was more important than integrity. Ethan pretending silence was neutrality. And Chloe accepting every luxury that magically appeared in front of her without ever asking where it came from. For the first time in my life, I stopped worrying about protecting them. Do it, I said. The hardest part wasn't filing the lawsuit. It wasn't gathering evidence either. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal afterward. That Sunday, I sat at my parents' dining table while my mother discussed flower arrangements for Chloe's birthday. I'm thinking gold accents, she said excitedly, while passing around fabric samples. Elegant but modern. That sounds beautiful, I replied. And I meant it. Because beautiful disasters are still beautiful right before they collapse. Chloe talked nonstop about custom cocktails, dessert stations, musicians, photo walls. Dad cut his steak quietly and avoided looking directly at me the entire night. Ethan sat beside me, pretending nothing was wrong. At one point, my mother casually mentioned maybe postponing my wedding to avoid overshadowing Chloe's milestone year. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the arrogance of it no longer felt believable. They truly thought I would keep absorbing this forever. That was the moment something inside me finally detached emotionally. Not explosively, quietly, like a rope snapping under years of tension. After dinner, I sat alone in my SUV outside my condo for almost 10 minutes before going inside. Then I opened my encrypted folder and labeled it birthday gift. The next 2 weeks turned me into someone I barely recognized. I still went to work every morning, still attended development meetings, still answered emails, and reviewed code like my life wasn't unraveling underneath my skin. My coworkers noticed I was quieter than usual. I blamed deadlines. Technically, that wasn't a lie. I was working toward one. Meanwhile, Victoria built the case piece by piece. Camille provided security footage from the vineyard office showing my parents arriving with a leather folder containing the forged documents. Time-stamped. Crystal clear. My mother smiling at the receptionist. My father carrying the paperwork. 37 seconds of footage that destroyed decades of carefully maintained reputation. Then came the email chain. My mother had been communicating directly with the venue coordinator for weeks, discussing upgrades for Chloe's party as though the transfer had already been approved. Cocktail hour extensions, custom dessert stations, premium wine packages. At one point she wrote, "Please send future invoices directly to me, not to me, to her." Because in her mind, my role in the situation was already finished. The money had been extracted. My opinion no longer mattered. Victoria hired a forensic handwriting analyst too. 5 business days later, the report arrived. I read it slowly inside Victoria's office while rain hit the windows outside. The question's signature demonstrates significant deviation from verified handwriting samples in pressure distribution, stroke formation, and letter alignment. Translation: the signature was fake. More specifically, the capital P loop matched my father's handwriting style almost perfectly. Mine never had. Victoria organized everything chronologically across her conference table. Years of financial manipulation, the vineyard transfer attempt, Ethan's loan agreement, security footage, emails, forgery analysis, a lifetime compressed into paperwork. This isn't just about one forged document anymore, she said quietly. This shows a pattern. Pattern. That word hit harder than fraud, because patterns mean repetition, intent, choice. My family hadn't hurt me accidentally. They had trained themselves to believe I existed primarily to support Chloe's life, and I had helped create that system by never stopping it earlier. But there was still one thing I needed: proof that Ethan knowingly hid everything from me. I didn't confront him directly. People rehearse lies when they expect accusations. I needed honesty before defense mechanisms activated, so I waited. 3 nights later, we cooked dinner together in my kitchen like nothing had changed. He chopped vegetables while I stirred pasta sauce. Normal sounds, normal lighting, normal life. That's the terrifying thing about betrayal. It rarely looks dramatic while it's happening. I kept my tone casual. Mom seems really excited about Chloe's party at Silver Ridge. His knife paused against the cutting board. Barely half a second, but I saw it. Yeah, he said. It'll be incredible. I nodded slightly. The same vineyard where our wedding is booked. He didn't look up. I'm sure your parents worked it out with the venue. Worked it out. Again, no confusion, no surprise, no outrage on my behalf. Just acceptance. He already knew the problem existed, which meant he had already accepted the solution. I changed the subject after that. Grocery shopping, weather, streaming shows. Within minutes, he relaxed again. That night, after he fell asleep, I searched his email one final time. 47 messages involving my mother. One from 3 weeks earlier stopped me cold. Forwarded from the venue coordinator. Everything regarding the deposit has been handled. Don't mention details to Savannah yet. She'll understand later. I stared at those words for a long time. She'll understand later. That sentence summarized my entire life. Savannah will understand. Savannah won't make trouble. Savannah can handle it. Savannah doesn't matter enough to require honesty. On Ethan's nightstand sat Chloe's birthday invitation in its black and gold envelope. He'd kept it displayed beside his lamp, like he was excited for it. I closed the laptop carefully and lay beside him staring at the ceiling until nearly sunrise. By then, I understood something important. The worst betrayals aren't committed by enemies. They're committed by people who fully expect your forgiveness. A week before the party, Chloe called me. She sounded breathless with excitement. Savvy, have you seen the venue in person yet? I almost laughed at the question. Not recently. Oh my God, it's unreal. Mom showed me everything yesterday. The terrace, the lights, the wine cellar. I can't believe she found this place. Found. Interesting word. How did she book it? I asked carefully. I don't know, Chloe said with a laugh. Mom has connections for everything. Then she spent 20 straight minutes talking about herself, her gold designer dress, her custom cake, her giant photo wall featuring 30 years of memories, her playlist, her personalized party favors, her luxury champagne tower. Not once during that entire conversation did she ask whether using my wedding venue affected me. Not once. At the end of the call, she finally said, "Can you come early Saturday to help set up?" "Of course," I said. After hanging up, I sat silently with my phone in my lap. Part of me wondered whether Chloe genuinely didn't know, whether maybe she was simply selfish instead of malicious. But eventually, I realized something important. When you spend your whole life benefiting from unfairness without ever questioning it, ignorance becomes a choice. Chloe never asked where things came from, because asking might have forced her to care, and caring would have interrupted her comfort, so she didn't ask. I added another note to my encrypted folder: willful ignorance. 3 days before the party, I visited my parents' house alone. I brought a gift bag containing an expensive candle for Chloe, the kind of meaningless luxury gift people bring when they're participating emotionally without actually feeling anything anymore. Mom and Chloe were out shopping. Dad was home alone in his office. I made him coffee. We discussed weather, traffic, and his consulting work like ordinary people. Then his phone rang. He stepped into the hallway to answer it. I had maybe 90 seconds. His filing cabinet stood exactly where it had since I was a child. Dark oak wood, brass handles, perfectly organized. Third drawer, third folder. Vineyard authorization. My hands stayed steady when I opened it. Inside was the original forged document. One page. My full legal name at the top. Fake authorization language beneath it. And my forged signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't mine. The upward loop on the capital P practically screamed my father's identity once you knew where to look. I photographed every angle quickly. Front page, back page, signature close-up. The confidence in the handwriting unsettled me most. This wasn't sloppy panic. This was practiced entitlement. The work of a man who believed consequences happened to other people. I returned everything exactly as I found it, closed the drawer, walked calmly back into the kitchen. When my father returned from his phone call, I was sipping coffee at the counter, smiling politely. 12 years old inside me wanted him to notice something was wrong. 32-year-old me finally understood he never would. The final week passed slowly. Camille updated me constantly. 300 guests confirmed, string musicians hired, additional desserts approved. Every new luxury addition to Chloe's party was partially funded by money stolen from me. "Your mom just added a late-night espresso bar," Camille told me during one phone call. "How much?" "About 6,000. I leaned back in my office chair. Letter. By then, Victoria had already filed the civil complaint under seal. Forgery referrals had been submitted to the district attorney's office. A licensed process server named Marcus had been hired and briefed. Everything was ready. At home, the original wedding confirmation still sat framed on my desk. Ivory cardstock, copper lettering, reservation holder, Savannah Pierce. That name had never changed officially. The vineyard still legally belonged to me. The party was 6 days away. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of disappointing my family anymore. 4 days before the party, my mother called while I was leaving work. "Honey, I need you at the vineyard early Saturday morning," she said immediately. "You're so much better at organizing than Chloe." Of course I was. I'd spent my entire life organizing the chaos they created. "No problem," I said. There was a satisfied pause on the other end of the line. Then she added casually, "I've also been thinking maybe you should move your wedding to next fall instead of spring." I stopped walking in the middle of the parking garage. "What?" "We don't want people comparing events," she explained smoothly. "This birthday is a huge milestone for Chloe. It deserves its own moment." Its own moment. At my venue, paid for with my money, using my stolen reservation. And somehow I was still expected to adjust around it. "Sure, Mom," I said quietly. "Whatever works best for the family." She laughed softly. "This is why you've always been my rock." Rock. Not daughter, not person. Foundation. Something stable you stand on while building someone else's happiness. After the call ended, I sat inside my SUV, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned pale. I didn't cry. That surprised me. For years, I thought confronting my family would feel explosive and emotional. Instead, it felt clarifying, like finally seeing a wound correctly after years of pretending it didn't hurt. That night, I opened the encrypted folder one more time. Every document sat there neatly organized. Forgery analysis, screenshots, loan agreements, security footage stills, emails, evidence of a lifetime. I stared at the folder name, birthday gift. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed beside Ethan for the last time as his fiancé. He fell asleep quickly. I stayed awake listening to him breathe and wondering how many moments in our relationship had actually belonged to him instead of my parents' influence. The answer scared me enough that I stopped asking. 2 days before the party, I met Victoria downtown for final preparations. She had transformed the entire situation into something frighteningly organized. The process server, Marcus, would pose as part of the vineyard staff. 3 envelopes prepared, one for my mother, one for my father, one for Ethan. Service timed strategically, public, documented, impossible to control. Camille had reserved a private room near the back of the vineyard in case I needed space afterward. A quiet wine library with leather chairs and locked doors. "Everything's ready," Victoria said calmly. She slid a thick manila envelope across the table toward me. Inside were copies of every major document: my father's forged authorization, handwriting analysis, email screenshots, financial records, security photos, Ethan's loan agreement, nearly my entire emotional history compressed into paperwork. My mother had also asked me to give a speech during Chloe's party. Victoria smiled slightly when I mentioned it. Perfect. That word settled strangely in my chest. Perfect. Because my mother thought she was giving me a supporting role in Chloe's celebration. She had no idea she was handing me the microphone that would destroy the illusion she spent decades building. Saturday morning arrived cold and quiet. I woke before sunrise. The apartment was dark, except for the faint blue glow of Ethan's phone charging beside the bed. He rolled over sleepily when I got dressed. "You're leaving already?" "Setup duty," I replied. He smiled tiredly. "Your mom would collapse without you." I looked at him for a long moment. The sad part was he actually meant that as a compliment. I dressed carefully. White blouse, navy blazer, tailored black pants. Professional, controlled, not festive. That mattered to me. In the mirror, I didn't look like a woman attending a birthday party. I looked like someone preparing to testify. The drive into the mountains took just under an hour. Fog sat low between the hills, while morning light slowly spread across the vineyards. I drove in silence. No music, no rehearsing speeches. By then, the words already lived inside me. Camille waited near the entrance when I arrived. She gave me one small nod. No hug, no dramatic sympathy, just quiet support from someone who understood exactly what this day meant. "Everything's in place," she said. I walked the property slowly. Staff members moved between tables setting centerpieces. Gold decorations covered nearly every surface. Massive floral arrangements. Crystal glasses, luxury linens. The giant custom cake sat beneath soft lighting near the terrace. A gold monogram shaped like a crown decorated the top. Every detail screamed expensive. Every detail screamed Chloe. And underneath all of it sat the foundation I paid for. I found the family table and slipped the manila envelope beneath my chair. The caterer passed by carrying invoices. "All additional charges are being billed to the Pierce account," he mentioned casually. My account, my deposit, my reservation. I smiled politely and thanked him. By evening, cars stretched nearly half a mile down the vineyard road. 300 guests, maybe more. My mother stood near the entrance, greeting people like royalty hosting a gala. Cream-colored designer gown, diamond earrings, perfect makeup, perfect smile. Watching her move through the crowd was surreal. She looked so comfortable inside the lie. My father stayed beside her, shaking hands quietly, performing respectability the same way he always had. Then Chloe arrived. Gold gown, champagne in hand, friends surrounding her. People applauded when she stepped onto the terrace. Actually applauded. She waved dramatically, like a celebrity entering an award ceremony. I stood near the bar, watching everything unfold. Ethan found me a few minutes later. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Just tired." He rested a hand against my lower back. I let it stay there. Not because I wanted comfort, because I wanted him exactly where I could see him when the truth landed. Victoria arrived shortly before dinner, wearing a gray suit and carrying a small clutch purse. She blended into the crowd instantly. Marcus was already behind the bar in vineyard staff uniform. Camille moved through the venue, coordinating details with practiced calm. Only 4 people at that entire party knew what was coming. The sunset turned the terrace gold. String musicians played softly beneath the oak trees. Wine flowed constantly. Laughter echoed across the hills. By every outward measure, it was a beautiful event. That's the strange thing about Collapse. Sometimes it happens under fairy lights with expensive music playing in the background. Dinner lasted nearly 2 hours. Course after course arrived while guests complimented my parents endlessly. "You raised wonderful daughters. Your family is beautiful. Chloe is so lucky." Every compliment felt like watching strangers admire a house with cracked foundations they couldn't see yet. Halfway through dinner, my mother stood and tapped her wine glass gently. The terrace quieted immediately. "Family has always been the center of our lives," she announced warmly. People smiled, nodded, listened. My mother knew exactly how to perform sincerity in public. "Everything your father and I do," she continued emotionally, "we do for our girls." I nearly laughed out loud. Instead, I sipped water calmly. Then came the speech about Chloe, her milestone birthday, her bright future. How proud they were of the woman she'd become. Guests clapped. Chloe dabbed fake tears carefully beneath her eyes. A woman seated beside me leaned over and whispered, "Your parents are incredible." I smiled politely. "You have no idea." Dessert arrived, then disappeared. The musicians shifted into slower music, while staff cleared plates quietly. And finally, my mother stood again, smiling directly at me. "There's one more person I'd love to hear from tonight," she said brightly. Her eyes locked onto mine. "Savannah, sweetheart, would you come say a few words about your sister?" Applause spread across the terrace. 300 faces turned toward me expectantly. Chloe smiled proudly. Ethan squeezed my hand once beneath the table. I stood slowly, reached beneath my chair, picked up the manila envelope. Nobody noticed it yet. They were all watching my face. I walked toward the microphone while the vineyard stretched behind me, glowing gold beneath the fading sunset. The air smelled like wine, stone, and summer grass. 300 guests waited quietly. I adjusted the microphone once, then looked directly at the crowd. "Thank you, Mom," I said calmly. My voice carried perfectly across the terrace. Steady, professional, controlled. No shaking, no tears. "I actually do have something important to say tonight." I placed the manila envelope gently on the podium. "But before I begin," I said, "I think everyone here deserves to hear the story of an $80,000 deposit." The word deposit changed the atmosphere instantly, not dramatically at first, just enough, like the temperature dropping a few degrees before a storm arrives. My mother's smile stayed frozen in place, but I saw her eyes narrow slightly. My father stopped reaching for his wine glass halfway through the motion. Ethan shifted beside his chair. 300 people sat quietly beneath hanging lights and oak branches, waiting for me to continue. I opened the envelope slowly. "6 years ago," I said calmly, "I started saving for my wedding." The crowd listened politely, still unaware of where this was going. Every overtime check, every freelance contract, every bonus from work. For 6 years, I built a wedding fund that eventually reached $80,000. Murmurs moved softly through nearby tables. That number got people's attention. "I booked this vineyard 7 months ago for my wedding to Ethan Cole." I paused intentionally. The reservation was placed fully under my name. The deposit was wired directly from my personal account. Confused looks started appearing around the terrace now. Chloe's smile weakened slightly. My mother stood perfectly still. "3 weeks ago," I continued, "the owner of this vineyard contacted me because 2 people attempted to transfer my reservation away from me using forged authorization documents." Now the silence changed completely. Not polite silence anymore. Focused silence. The kind where people stop breathing normally. I removed the photocopy of the forged letter from the envelope and held it up. "My name appears on this document," I said, "and so does my signature." Then I laid it flat against the podium. "The problem is that I never signed it." My mother stood abruptly. "Savannah," she snapped sharply, "this is not appropriate." I looked directly at her. "This is exactly appropriate." My voice never rose. That unsettled people more than screaming would have. "The venue being used tonight was paid for with my money." A wave of whispers spread across the tables. Chloe turned toward Mom slowly. "What is she talking about?" Mom ignored her. I lifted another page from the envelope. "A forensic handwriting analyst confirmed the signature on this authorization letter was forged." Then I looked at my father for the first time all evening. The upward loop on the capital P matches my father's handwriting style precisely. My father's face lost color immediately. He didn't deny it, didn't speak, didn't move. And somehow that silence confirmed everything more loudly than words could have. Phones started appearing across the crowd, people recording, people texting, people staring. My mother took a step toward me. "You are humiliating this family." I kept my eyes on her. "No," I said quietly. "I'm exposing it." The terrace went completely silent again. Even the musicians had stopped moving. Then I pulled Ethan's loan agreement from the envelope. And there's more. Ethan went rigid behind me. 8 months ago, my fiancé accepted a private $45,000 loan from my father. Gasps spread openly now. Ethan stood halfway from his chair. "Savannah," I continued speaking over him. "That loan created leverage, which explains why he stayed silent when my parents transferred my wedding venue to my sister's birthday party." Ethan's chair scraped loudly against stone. "That's not fair," he said weakly. I looked directly at him. "I found the emails." His face changed instantly. Not outrage, fear. My mother specifically instructed him not to tell me about the deposit because... I glanced down at the printed screenshot. "Savannah will understand later." Several guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh my God." I placed the documents back onto the podium carefully. "I'm not sharing this publicly because I enjoy embarrassing people," I said to the crowd. "I'm sharing it because every person sitting here deserves to know exactly what paid for this event." I gestured around the terrace slowly. The flowers, the orchestra, the wine, the private venue, the designer decorations, all of it was built using money stolen from me. My mother finally lost control completely. "How dare you!" she shouted. Her polished hostess mask cracked instantly. Guests flinched. "You selfish, jealous little—" "What exactly have you ever given me, Mom?" I asked it softly. Honestly, not sarcastically. That question hit harder than yelling ever could have. She stared at me, speechless for a moment. "We raised you," she snapped finally. "You raised Chloe," I replied calmly. "You funded Chloe. You protected Chloe. You built entire worlds around Chloe." I looked around slowly. "I funded myself." Silence. Heavy and absolute. "You gave Chloe cars, tuition, apartments, and eventually a 6-figure birthday celebration," I continued. "You gave me responsibilities and called it independence." My mother pointed toward me furiously. "She's always been jealous of her sister." But the crowd had already seen the documents, the forged signature, the emails. The evidence spread across the podium beneath soft golden lights. Nobody looked convinced anymore. My father still hadn't spoken. Not once. He sat motionless, staring downward, like if he stayed quiet enough, reality might reverse itself. A former law partner of his slowly pushed his chair back from the table. Not leaving, just distancing himself. That tiny movement said everything. "You gave me one role in this family," I said quietly to my mother. "The daughter who pays for things and stays quiet about it." My mother opened her mouth again. Nothing came out. For the first time in my entire life, she had lost control of the narrative. Camille stepped forward then, calm, steady, professional. She took the microphone gently from the stand. "My name is Camille Bennett," she said. "I own Silver Ridge Estate." Every eye shifted toward her immediately. "Savannah Pierce booked her wedding here 7 months ago and paid the full deposit herself." She paused. 3 weeks ago, Elaine and Daniel Pierce attempted to transfer that reservation using forged authorization documents. My mother's face turned bright red. "This is a private family matter," she snapped. Camille looked directly at her. "No, Mrs. Pierce.
Forged documents submitted to a business are a legal matter. That landed hard. Then Marcus moved. The process server stepped away from the bar carrying 3 white envelopes. Quietly, efficiently. He approached my mother first. "Elaine Pierce," he said calmly. She stared at him in confusion. "You've been served." The entire terrace froze. He handed her the envelope, then turned toward my father. "Daniel Pierce." Dad accepted the envelope mechanically without looking up. Marcus walked to Ethan last. "Ethan Cole."
Ethan looked like he might actually faint. He took the envelope slowly, with shaking hands. 3 envelopes, 3 lives collapsing simultaneously. My mother ripped hers open immediately. As she scanned the first page, her anger disappeared. Not guilt, not shame, recognition. The realization that consequences had finally arrived. Victoria stood calmly near the back of the terrace and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "A civil complaint alleging fraud, forgery, and financial exploitation has officially been filed," she announced. "Additional criminal referrals have also been submitted to the district attorney's office." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 300 people sat frozen beneath fairy lights, watching an entire family detonate in real time. Then Chloe started crying. Real crying. Not dramatic tears. Not attention-seeking emotion. The kind that happens when someone suddenly realizes the floor beneath them never belonged to them at all. "I didn't know," she whispered toward me. "Savannah, I swear I didn't know about the forged signature." I looked at her for a long moment, then asked the only question that mattered. "Did you ever ask where the money came from?" She said nothing, because she never had. In 30 years, Chloe had accepted every gift, every rescue, every luxury without once questioning who paid the price for it. And silence has consequences too. Guests slowly began standing from tables. Some headed toward the parking lot quietly. Others stayed frozen in place, unable to look away. A woman from my mother's social circle approached our table carefully. "Elaine," she said quietly, "please tell me this isn't true." Mom straightened instantly, trying to recover control. "It's exaggerated," she insisted desperately. "Savannah is emotional." The woman looked at the documents spread across the podium, then at my father, then at the process server, then at the handwriting analysis. Finally, she looked back at my mother with visible disappointment and walked away without another word. 3 more people followed within the next minute. That's the thing about reputations. They collapse much faster than they're built. I picked up the microphone one final time. "I didn't come here tonight to destroy anyone," I said quietly. My voice stayed steady, completely steady. "I came here because my family spent years believing my silence belonged to them." I looked around the terrace one last time. They were wrong. Then I placed the microphone back onto the stand, picked up my purse, left the evidence on the podium, and walked away from the terrace without looking back. The stone pathway leading away from the terrace curved through rows of grapevines lit by soft, golden lights. Behind me, I could still hear distant voices rising and overlapping in confusion. Chairs moving, glasses clinking, 300 people trying to process what they had just witnessed. I didn't turn around, not once. Camille caught up beside me near the parking area. Neither of us spoke immediately. There wasn't much left to say anyway. Some moments change your life so completely that language becomes too small for them. We walked side by side beneath the cool mountain air until we reached my SUV. Only then did Camille finally look at me. "You okay?" I thought about the question honestly. Was I okay? My engagement had just collapsed publicly. My parents were facing lawsuits. My family name was probably already spreading through half of Asheville by text message. And somehow, "Yes," I said quietly. For the first time in years, I actually meant it. Camille nodded once like she understood exactly what kind of okay I meant. Not happiness. Relief. I sat inside my SUV with the engine off for several minutes after she walked away. The vineyard glowed softly in the distance behind me. Music had stopped completely now. The party was over even if nobody had officially announced it yet. I opened my glove compartment. Inside sat my original booking confirmation. Ivory cardstock, copper lettering. Reservation holder, Savannah Pierce, still mine. It had always been mine. My eyes drifted toward my left hand resting against the steering wheel. The engagement ring caught faint light from the dashboard. Ethan had proposed 14 months earlier at a rooftop restaurant in Charlotte. I remembered saying yes before he even finished speaking. At the time, I thought the ring symbolized partnership. Now it looked more like collateral, purchased during the same period my father secretly loaned him $45,000. Everything connected eventually. Every lie circled back to the same source. I slid the ring off slowly, held it in my palm for a moment, then placed it carefully into the center console. The small metallic sound it made against the plastic felt strangely final. Not dramatic, not tragic, just finished. I drove home alone through dark mountain roads without music, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel responsible for fixing anyone else's emotions. The next week unfolded quietly, not peacefully, quietly. There's a difference. The silence after destruction feels different than normal silence. Heavier somehow, like dust settling after a building collapse. Victoria updated me constantly. My parents had hired defense attorneys within 48 hours. The civil suit moved forward. Forgery allegations remained under review with the district attorney's office. My father's consulting firm released a statement announcing he was taking leave during an internal ethics review. Translation: they were distancing themselves before the damage spread further. His professional reputation collapsed fast after that. Turns out attorneys who forge signatures tend to make people nervous. 3 families canceled business partnerships connected to him within the first week. Their country club quietly declined to renew my parents' membership. No public explanation. None needed. People understand scandal perfectly well without official announcements. Ethan moved out on Tuesday while I was at work. When I came home, his apartment key sat on the kitchen counter beside the original loan agreement. Underneath it was a yellow sticky note. I'm sorry. 2 words. Worthless ones. I stared at the note for nearly a minute before throwing it away. Not because I was angry anymore, because I finally understood something important. Apologies without accountability are just attempts to reduce consequences. I texted him exactly once. The engagement is over. Do not contact me again. He never replied. I didn't expect him to. Chloe called 3 days after the party. I let it go to voicemail the first time. Then she called again. And again. Finally, I answered. She sounded exhausted. Not devastated about me, devastated about herself. Why would you do that publicly? She asked immediately. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry. Not, how could mom and dad do this to you? Just, why embarrass us publicly? I leaned back against my kitchen counter, listening to her breathe on the other end. You really still don't understand, I said quietly. I didn't know about the forgery. Maybe not, I replied. But you knew your entire life was being funded by somebody else's sacrifices. You just never cared enough to ask whose. Silence. Then tears. I'm your sister. I closed my eyes briefly. That was supposed to mean something both ways. Then I hung up. She never called again after that. A week later, Camille texted me an article link from the Asheville Citizen-Times. Local vineyard fraud scandal erupts during birthday celebration. The article itself was short, maybe 200 words, but people shared it everywhere. Ironically, Silver Ridge Estate became even more popular afterward. Camille's bookings increased almost 40% over the next month. Apparently, integrity makes excellent advertising. She texted me afterward. Turns out exposing fraud is good for business. That made me laugh for the first time in weeks. Real laughter, not polite performance. Victoria eventually added Ethan formally into portions of the civil filing connected to concealment and financial cooperation. He settled quickly. Of course he did. Men like Ethan avoid conflict until avoidance becomes impossible. Then they surrender immediately. My parents fought harder, especially my mother. She still believed emotional pressure could solve legal consequences. 3 weeks after the party, she called from a blocked number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But some part of me wanted to hear her voice one last time without illusions attached to it. Savannah. she said immediately, controlled and cold. This has gone far enough. No apology, of course not. You made your point, she continued. Now drop the lawsuit so we can move on as a family. Family. Interesting word coming from someone who forged my signature. I am moving on, I said calmly. You're being vindictive. No, I replied quietly. I'm being clear. Silence stretched between us. I could hear faint kitchen noises behind her. Probably the same kitchen where she'd spent years calling me her rock while standing on my back emotionally. Your father and I only wanted what was best for Chloe. There it was, the justification. The same justification that had shaped my entire childhood. I didn't interrupt her this time, didn't fill the silence for her. I had spent 32 years making emotional space for my mother. That habit finally ended. Blood is thicker than water, she said sharply when I remained quiet. Blood doesn't give you permission to steal from me. Another silence. Longer now, then softer. You're going to regret this. I looked around my condo slowly. Peaceful. Quiet. Mine. No, I said honestly. I regret waiting this long. And then I hung up. Blocked the number permanently. Not out of revenge, out of clarity. That's the difference people don't always understand. Cutting someone off isn't always emotional. Sometimes it's practical. Sometimes it's simply the moment you finally stop handing people access to hurt you. Months later, I visited Silver Ridge Estate again, alone. Spring had started returning to the mountains. The vines were green again. Wildflowers lined the stone paths. Camille met me near the terrace carrying 2 glasses of wine. You sure you still want the wedding here? She asked carefully. I looked out across the hills. Same sunset view, same oak trees, same terrace where everything collapsed. Yes, I said, because the venue had never been the problem. The people were. I rebooked the wedding for the following spring. Smaller guest list, 60 people instead of 300. No family invitations. No dramatic debates about whether I should invite my parents again. That door was already closed, not slammed. Just closed quietly and permanently. Camille became my maid of honor, although she joked that her official title should be emotional support vineyard owner. Victoria mailed me a congratulations card afterward with a handwritten note inside. Best closing argument I've ever witnessed at a birthday party. I framed that note beside my original booking confirmation. Sometimes survival deserves documentation too. The last time I ever heard my mother's voice was through that blocked number phone call. The last time I saw my father was across the terrace holding lawsuit papers in shaking hands, and the last thing I ever gave my family was the truth. That was enough. The framed reservation confirmation still sits on my desk today. Same ivory cardstock, same copper lettering, same name, Savannah Pierce. It never changed, and neither did the lesson. If someone tells you that you won't mind while taking something that belongs to you, believe them carefully. Because what they're really telling you is how little they value your pain. And once you understand that, protecting yourself stops feeling cruel. It starts feeling necessary. Some betrayals don't break your heart all at once. They break it slowly, piece by piece, until one day you realize the people you kept sacrificing for would have taken everything from you if you had stayed silent. I spent 32 years believing love meant being useful, being patient, being the one who understood while everyone else took what they wanted. But love without respect is just exploitation wearing a familiar face. The hardest part wasn't losing my family. It was realizing I never truly had the version of them I kept fighting for. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't forgiveness. Sometimes it's finally standing up, telling the truth out loud, and walking away without looking back.